Okay, so that went well. All right. So back to the introduction. Yes, that's where I stay. I stay in Dubai. I work in as a wellness specialist, and I usually use other methodologies, but my favorite, my go-to is solution focused. Would anybody else want to share?
Hi, we'll go. Aisha and Joe, who's there, from Family-Based Solutions in the UK.
Right.
Hi, and oh, sorry, Paul.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Hi, I'm Gesa. I'm German, but work and live in the Netherlands, and I work in mental health care. So this is why we connected on LinkedIn as well this week.
Yes.
And I developed the solution focused game. So it's a bit of both. I'm an entrepreneur and an OT.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm Pout, I'm Dutch, and I live about 40 minutes away from Geza, which is interesting. I am an independent solution-focused trainer and organizational consultant, mainly in the field of healthcare, social work, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Nice to meet you, Pout.
My name is Klaus. I am from Germany, and I met Insu at a conference in 2001 and joined the Solutionist in 2003 and still happy with the approach.
Wow. Nice to have you, Klaus. All right. Should we start? Are we ready? So today we're going to talk about having one conversation that's influential, otherwise called as single session therapy. Are you familiar with the term single session therapy? All right, great. So we're going to see how solution focus fits in with that, how we can use it either as a single session or just as a one conversation. It can be an interaction, it can be anything where we can make a difference. In that brief interaction, we can actually make a difference. So have you ever met a client for only one session? Just to get an idea, how many of you have met a client for only one session? All right. So around 88% of us have. Probably everybody at some point will have met a client for only one session for one reason or another, right? So it's something that we will do regardless whether we plan for it or not. It's going to happen throughout our career. So how do we deal with this session, that first session that might be the only session? And how can we make it the most impactful? When you did have that session, did you feel like it could have been effective? Do you think it might have been effective?
Just a question, Shima. How would you like us to respond? Would you like responses in the chat or just raise our hands and tell you what you prefer?
Yeah, I was actually looking at raising hands, but sure, in the chat as well.
Whatever. Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Right. So you can write it. So it was, yes, Sebastian saying yes, it was. So we know that sometimes that one session was enough, right? And that's why we're not seeing the clients again. And that's pretty much what got me interested, was a session I had early on where I was seeing an international student studying in another country. And he was extremely anxious, so anxious he lost in touch with reality. There was some sort of psychosis in what he was saying and imagining and all of that. And he was so scared of the stigma at the time. And he came from a country, very collectivist country, afraid that anybody would know that he's seeking help. So he said, I can only see you this once. I will not give my real information. There was no way for me to reconnect with him. And I thought, there's nothing I can do in one session to help this person. He needs a lot of help. It seemed to me like he needed more help than what I can afford to give in a session. But that's all I had. So I thought, maybe I can just give at least some temporary comfort, something. And, so we went through the session and I let it go. And 4 months later, I received an email. And this student had emailed me saying that it was his first semester, saying that this session grounded him somehow. And he did a lot better and he did well in his exams and he made friends and he was well adapted to the new place. And I was really surprised. Having remembered the case, I was surprised what could have happened in that one session that made that impact. And at the time, I wasn't aiming for that. I was just aiming for temporary comfort. So I started to look for and took to the literature to see if such a thing really exists and what it is that we can do in one conversation that can make a difference. And so do you think Freud ever practiced single session? No? Anybody thinks they may have? Freud may have?
He may have scared people away, but probably not successfully cured.
Yes. But actually, we have two sessions proved in books that he dealt with people for a single session and it was proved successful. So it was both of them were when he was traveling, and that's the reason why it was a single session. One of them was Katrina in 1893, and she had a panic attack when he was traveling and he met her and he talked with her and it was a case of incest and it proved effective after that, and he included it in his book, Studies in Hysteria. And the other one was his friend, Gustav Mahler, and he met him in 1910, also on vacation. And it was for marriage consultation or a marriage issue that he was having. And this too proved effective. So even as long back as Sigmund Freud, a single session could make a difference.
Yeah, you get answer lah. 快点 text 他问他。Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, 问他。Okay, next. Come.
Can you see my slides? Are my slides clear? Okay, thank you, Liz. Thank you. All right. Is it my voice that's not clear? It's good?
You're good.
Right.
You're good, Oren. You're
Okay.
good in London.
All right, great. So, but it wasn't, I'm really sorry, I can't see the chat. I have to, yes, okay, thank you. So it was, but it didn't become evidence-based. It didn't take the term single session till later in 1990 when Mush Talman, he was a practicing psychologist in California. And one day he was going through his files and found out that 200 of his clients had only come for one session and they never came back. And he thought, maybe I can call them to find out why and improve my service. But surprisingly, when he called them, 78% of them didn't come back because they got what they wanted. It was enough. It was effective. And so he and his colleagues, mainly Michael Hoyt and others, started evidence-based research on single session therapy to see what it is that can make one session so effective. So what is single session therapy? I'm going to open the chat box. What do you think single session therapy is? Or if somebody wants to say as well. I never know if I did a good job, so the client didn't return, or I was so bad that they ran away. Yes, it's true. And we tend to always think that they didn't come back because they were dissatisfied. Whereas in more than 50% of the cases, the reason they didn't come back is that they got what they needed. So any ideas about single session?
Shima,
Yeah.
is that something statistically proven? Like more than 50% of the time they do not come back because they were satisfied?
Yes,
there-
there is. We're
Oh,
going to be
oh.
sharing some research to prove this. Yes.
Oh, okay, sure.
Correct.
Interesting.
Yes.
No,
Okay. All right. So single session is simple. It's when the therapist and the client agree to meet for one session to address a certain concern, and we allow the client to move forward on their own. So what makes it different from normal therapy is we know that we're not going to be there as part of the process. We are just doing we're just the catalyst. We're starting it, but they're going to do the journey on their own. Given that, there are two very important things for single session therapy. First of all, more help is available if needed. So the client has to know that they can get help again. So it actually, research proved that just knowing this gave better results because they felt supported. So even if they didn't come back, knowing that they could have was helpful. And that's why Wendy Dryden from UK, he didn't like the term single session. He said, if we want them to know that there's going to be more help, then why not call it one at a time therapy? So you're going to have one session and see whether or not it's enough, and you're always welcome to come back. Now, Jeff Young from Australia, he didn't really agree. He thought single session therapy had a shock effect.
Are we
Where
supposed to send our presentation material today?
Sorry? Sorry?
Edwin, you might want to mute your microphone.
Yes,
Oh,
he did.
wonderful.
All right. He said that the term single session therapy offered a shock effect where both the client and the therapist are giving their best because they know, this is what we're going to be working with. So he thought, just leave it at that. And then we will tell them that they have more help if needed. And also because this help, mostly a lot of times single session therapy takes place in walk-in clinics. So help might not be by the same therapist. They can always walk in again, but it might not be the same therapist. So it's a single session with that person. And the other important point is that the service is offered at the time of need. What's very special about single session therapy is that we can offer it when the client needs it instead of having that waiting list. And that's very important because that's when the client is willing to open up, when they really need it. A lot of times, if we're waiting 2 months before we have our session, we might not even be in a state where we want to open up or we want to discuss this anymore. So having it at a time of need, usually experts say within a week of when the client first requests it. And single session is based on several bases. The first one is that the most frequent number of sessions client have is 1, followed by 2, followed by 3. So clients want to have the least number of sessions possible. As soon as they've had enough, as soon as they got what they needed, they want to stop. It's not because they didn't like the sessions, because that's when they want to stop. So mostly the most frequent number is 1 session where people are back on track and they feel, okay, this was good, followed by 2 sessions, followed by 3. So it's not very common that people want to stay in therapy for a long time. And more than 50% of clients report satisfaction after 1 session. There are several studies about this. There's some studies going up to until 78%, like we said with Talaman, but mostly more than 50% are satisfied after 1 session. The third point is that therapists are poor at predicting who will continue and who will not. We don't really know. We don't really know. I read one in the chat box, one comment that said, we don't know, were they satisfied or did they run away? We don't know if they walk out satisfied, if this satisfaction will bring them back, or if this satisfaction meant they got enough. So we can't really base on our prediction of whether the client will come back or not. And we all do, like we saw in the poll at the beginning, all of us are going to meet that one client that doesn't come back. So that's by default. Even if we intended for them to stay in therapy for a while and they didn't, by default, it's a single session. So why not do it by design? Be aware that that first session, that first encounter can be the only one. It's very likely to be. It's the most frequent number. So why not design for it to be effective enough to help them? So even if they are not coming back, they have something to work with. And that was the basis on which single session therapy was planned. And the core assumptions of it are based on the fact that we believe humans are capable of helping themselves quickly. It depends on if they want to, right? A lot of time we even know what we need to do to help ourselves, and we can do it, but it's really how motivated we are to do so. And this is proven by a story of a mother, a 50-year-old mother from China. Her name is Wang. And she had been overweight her entire life. She had always failed at dieting and losing weight. But when she was 50 and she wanted to donate her kidney to her son, she was required to lose 20 kilos. And she did that in 3 months only. She was walking 10 kilos a day, and in 3 months, she was able to lose 20 kilos, something she hadn't done all her life. So once she was motivated to do it, once she wanted to, she changed. So humans can do that. They can change quickly. And the second assumption is based on Parkinson's law, which talks about the expandable nature of time. If I have 6 sessions to accomplish something, I will probably take that long to do it. If I have 2, then I'll probably just take 2. And if I have 1, then I will take 1. So the more time we have, the more time we're going to take. It's not like we're going to get more done during that time, right? And even research shows that over time, even long-term therapy, the most change is happening in the first 6 sessions. And then the rest is very minute changes. So that first session is actually the maximum amount of change that we can get in one session. So we can lever on that. The other assumption is we know that all we have is now, but then all we need is here, right? We have the therapist's expertise, and we have the client bringing in the tools, bringing in the issue, bringing in the solution. So everything we need is actually there in that session, and we can use that to make the change we want. And because single session allows us to give the service once it's needed, so very soon after the client requires it, that makes it better in that sense. They're more motivated to open up. They're more motivated to change. If they're used to dealing with the problem for so long, 2 or 3 months, they'll get used to that coping strategy. Whereas sooner, we can develop whatever strategy they're going to use, or whatever things they're going to do, they can develop it soon on. And although it gives them a little bit, we're going to talk about how it's important to just walk away with one takeaway, and it can be so useful. That one takeaway can be life-changing, whereas sometimes we can be overwhelmed with a lot of things and really not use any of them. So let's play a little game. True or false? You think single session therapy is just a consultation? It's not real psychotherapy. Okay. Most of you say false. That's nice. Only if you think it's just a consultation. Do you think a single session allows for the development of a healthy therapeutic relationship? Can we build that transformative connection in one session? So 75% say we can. Do you think it's just Band-Aid therapy? Real change needs time. This is just like a Band-Aid. 87% think it's not. Is it a crisis intervention? It's not for complex issues or vulnerable clients, just a crisis intervention. 82% think it's not. And the last one, do you think it's easier to deliver than long-term therapy? 28% say it is easier. It's easier than long-term therapy. So let's have a look. In terms of, is single session just a consultation, not a psychotherapy? Ontario, Canada has the most walk-in clinics. So more than 80 walk-in clinics. And that's why a lot of the therapists there practice single session therapy. And until recently, those hours that they practiced could not be included in their accreditation. They were not considered therapy. They were actually considered just a consultation. Until Karen Young, she's a narrative therapist that does practice single session therapy, and she took out with her colleagues to prove that single session therapy is therapy. That they provided a document showing that it meets all the criteria of psychotherapy, because she considered that psychotherapy, it's not about whether it's long or short, it just depends on those moments that are therapeutic, those moments that can be transformative. They could happen in one session, they could happen in 10, but it's that moment that really counts. And a lot of profound, meaningful shifts can happen in a single session. And since that is the case, then it meets the criteria for therapy. And in 2019, the rule changed, and single session hours are now considered as therapy and are accredited in Canada. So it's not just a consultation, it does the same effect as psychotherapy. And when we talk about how long it takes to make that therapeutic connection, it's usually actually done, even in longer therapy, it's done in that first session, the beginning of that first session. We know whether or not we click with the therapist or the client clicks with us. And research even showed that. So therapeutic relationship for single session therapy had an average of 35.4 out of 40. And for long-term therapy, it was only 36 out of 40. So not much of a difference. I experienced that myself. I once saw a young man during his exams. He was having a hard time in college, and I had only 20 minutes to speak with him. He came back and left a review. And I was surprised that in those 20 minutes, one of the things he commented on was the connection. It doesn't take long to make the connection. The connection happens in the beginning. And is it just a Band-Aid therapy? Because change does require time. That is true. Even for us, change does take time. But the idea of single session is not about being with the client throughout the change. It's initiating it, right? So studies show that even 5 years after a single session, clients it was still impacting their medication. They were using less medication after a single session up to 5 years later. And even up to 8 years later, research shows that it continued to be effective in some way. So it's not so much that we're there throughout the change happening, it's that we created something and change can come on its own with the client after that. It's sort of like when a car is stuck in the sand or the snow, and it's not moving, it's stuck, and it needs that push. We're not going to drive with the driver until his destination. We're just going to help make that push so that the driver is able to take it to the destination he wants. And that's sort of what single session therapy is, just that push. And is it a crisis intervention? Research shows that there's no direct relationship between the severity of the problem and the duration of effective treatment. Some very complex problems can be not necessarily completely cured, but we can have results for them in a single session, and sometimes long-term therapy does nothing. Usually, clients that use walk-in clinics are the more vulnerable ones because they have a hard time waiting. They're not going to wait 2 or 3 months. They have lower distress tolerance, and so they tend to go to walk-in clinics. And still, research finds that it's effective. Research is looking for improved or significantly improved. So research is not saying that the client is walking in with a certain disorder or a certain issue that is completely resolved after they walk out. But that session certainly made an improvement. And that is obvious in all research. Is it easier to deliver than long-term therapy? So this one, the falls had the highest percentage. Some people might think it's easier. Maybe it is to some people, depending on the talents that they have, because we all come with different talents. But it's just like running. I remember when I was younger at school, we used to do the Terry Fox run. And as we were preparing, the school we would have trials, and the school would decide who's doing the 100 meters, the 800, and the marathons. And depending on how far they were going to run, they were preparing and training in a different way to have the skills. So for example, if it's the 100-meter run, once they start, they can already see the finish line. So as soon as that whistle goes, they have to really give their best from the start, because it's okay. They can still get to the finish line. They'll have the endurance to do that. With the 800 meters, it's important to pace, right? If you start off strong, you might get exhausted before the finish line. And with the marathon, it's all about endurance. It's not about speed anymore. So Talents are different. It's not necessarily easier or more difficult, but it requires a different talent, a different strategy to make it effective than if we were doing longer term therapy. Thank you, Fat. So did we prove the 5 points? Do we all agree now? All right. So let's see how we can do this. Now we're going to look at why solution-focused is the best way to do a single session. Why it's our best option, because a single session is not an approach, it's a method of delivery. So what approach are we going to use in that single session? And why do we think that solution-focused is the best? First is efficiency. Solution-focused is made to be brief and time efficient. So it'll give us the best results in that brief encounter. Solution-focused focuses on the solution. It's inherently future focused. So we don't have time in a single session to resolve or process past issues. If we're going to use that single session and get the best out of it, then we want to activate some sort of behavior, some sort of change that can keep going on in the future. So solution focus offers us that. Solution focus is based on client empowerment. And like we said, with a single session, we're not going to be there the entire ride, right? We're pushing the car and we're allowing them to take their car to the journey. We want them to be empowered as they do so. And solution focus allows us that. It helps us empower the client so they can continue their journey on their own. It's adaptable, it's flexible for various issues, various client populations, so we can use it in single sessions. And it helps with building resilience. We focus on identifying and amplifying the client's strength. We point out their resilience to them. By empowering them, they become more resilient because they're going to take the journey on their own. So that's how solution focus makes for the perfect approach to use if we're going to have that single encounter with a client. I know a lot of people here are solution-focused experts. I prepared this. I wasn't sure if we're going to be people who are going to be introduced to the solution-focused approach. So just in a few words, what the solution-focused approach is, it's a focus on the preferred future. Usually in therapy, we start with what's the issue we're going to be dealing with. And even in solution-focused, we do hear that. But we quickly move on to what do we want instead? Okay, so this is the problem. This is the issue we're dealing with. What do we want instead? And so that's the focus, the preferred future, the best hopes. We are empowering the client. We want to highlight their internal and external resources. What are their strengths? What are external resources they can connect with that can make them more empowered? And the interview itself, the way we question, we word our questions, and how they are used to guide the client, to empower them, that is the intervention. It's the wording of the questions and the questions that we use that make the solution-focused approach its unique intervention. And the basics, I think these basics apply in life in general, but the basics by Steve was, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Something is not impacting their life, we leave it alone, we make no assumptions. Once we know what works, and that's the focus of solution focused, we want to know what works for the client. We want to collaborate with them to see what works for them. Once we know that, we encourage more of it. And if we know something doesn't work, no matter what research tells us it should work, no matter how many other people benefited from the strategy, if it's not working for them, we try something different. So those are the simple basics of the solution-focused approach. And the core assumptions are that understanding the details of the problems is not essential. So Insu and Steve, they once met, they had a family with 27 problems. And the solution had nothing to do with any of those problems. So the solution does not necessarily relate to the problem directly. And so understanding the details is not going to help. Clients are the experts, so they take the lead. We're just facilitators. They are responsible. They bring in the content, they bring the issue, they bring in the tools, they bring in.
Why is safe sufficient to republish?
Sorry?
Sorry.
Now, what's the goal of our conversation? When we're going in and knowing this might be the only encounter, whether we have planned with the client that this is the only time we'll meet, or it's our first and it might be our last. The goal of the conversation is probably that the client is coming because they feel stuck somehow. Something is not working for them and they have tried. They're not going to come when they first meet the problem. They probably tried and it didn't work out for them and they need help. So what our goal is to help them get unstuck from there, that place where it seems like nothing is working, trying to find a way out. How we can take the first step forward, create with them a plan of what they're going to do differently to get to where they want to get. And we're going to look at how we're going to elicit as many minute details as possible to help them know what they need to do to take that first step forward. And then after that, they continue on their own. So we set the preferred future together. They have a plan of how to get there, but that journey, they're going to be doing on their own. And that is the goal of that one conversation. So suppose you're meeting a client for only one time. What would you want to focus on? You can write in the chat box or we can talk about it together. If you're going to meet the client for one time, what is it that you feel is important to focus on?
On the preferred future?
Yes, absolutely. Know where they want to go. What else? The bottleneck, the constraint between now and where they want to go. What's the challenge in the way and how they can overcome that? Yes. Strength, transferable skills, preferred future. Yes, absolutely. The miracle question. So the miracle question would give us a lot of detail about their preferred future, right? Best hopes, desired outcome for sure. And then the resource talk. What skills and what resources they're going to be building on. Yes. How they have overcome previous challenges. Yes. What worked before and what didn't also. So you pretty much covered the main points, all of them. The mindset that we go in with a solution-focused mindset for that one session is, well, first of all, we need to be aware that we're going to act as if it's the only one. We want to give it our best shot. We're not going to be delaying things for later. We're really going to try to give the client what they need in that interaction. So we start therapy from the first moment. We're not going to waste much time. We let the client lead. We focus on the preferred future. We had a lot of that. We focus on the client's resources. And we know that our aim is one meaningful takeaway. One meaningful takeaway from the session is really what we want. And that's why Wendy Dryden says that the length of a single session does not need to be like the regular session. It's really going to depend on that one meaningful takeaway. So if we arrive to a meaningful takeaway 30 minutes after we start the session, it's best to start wrapping up because going on might just dilute that strong takeaway. So we want to hold on to that. We start to wrap up. And if we finished our 50 minutes or hour and we still haven't reached that really strong, meaningful takeaway, it's okay to extend. It's okay to go on for a while. So that's why a single session can be anywhere between 30 minutes and 90 minutes, an hour and a half, depending on when we feel there's that meaningful takeaway that the client can walk away with. And the process, we're going to look at the process. It's really up to your judgment. You don't need to go through the entire process. You will see where the client is, and that's where you will start. You don't need for every client to go through the whole thing. You will customize it to the client, but these are just ideas that can be used in a single session. So we have a pre-session preparation. A lot of walk-in clinics use that. It's a form that the client can fill out before starting the session. And there are benefits to that. We're going to look at it. But if you don't want to, it's perfectly fine as well. It's optional. Then we have the opening of the session, how we start off the session, what goes on in the core of the session, how we close it. And again, it's optional to do a follow-up and an evaluation if possible, and if you'd like to. What do you think is useful about a pre-session preparation? Maybe it's a short form where they're asked what's the issue that they're presenting with, and maybe even asked about things like their weaknesses, their strengths and their resources and things that we will be discussing. What would help us if they filled out that form before? Any ideas? Yes. Pre-session change. Yes. It's therapeutic. It can be therapeutic on its own. Even before we start the session, it already starts to happen. Yes, thank you. So it gives the client the opportunity to think of the questions, which is pretty much what we're going to be doing. So instead of them being, meeting the question for the first time, probably having to think about it, they have their own time to think. And that might come up with even more useful answers than if they were just to meet the question on spot. And even if there are different questions that are going to be there in the session, but they'll be starting on their way of thinking in that direction. They'll be thinking about it. And it helps prepare them for the session so that they can get the best out of it. It helps the therapist as well. We can even ask the client, is it okay if I refer to your questions and your answers as we go through the session, because that can help us do it more effectively. And the most important part is that it can be therapeutic in itself. And it reminds me of my own experience with this. So when I was in high school, I was taking advanced math. My mother was a math teacher, and I had to do a lot of practicing at home. And sometimes when I'm solving the problems, I struggle with one. I get stuck. And my mother had a rule. So whatever she was doing, she didn't need to stop and come help me. Whatever she was doing, and a lot of times it might be doing the dishes or anything, she would just tell me, okay, tell me the question. And as I explain the question to her, as I verbalize it and I try to organize the given so I can get to where I want to get, as I do that, it gets organized in my brain, and there I am. I find the solution even before she talks about it. And so when we sometimes, when the thoughts are in our head, they'll keep turning and turning, and it's hard to get something out of it. But once we start organizing it to tell someone else, we ourselves can start seeing it from a different dimension and noticing things that we were overlooking. And then we start causing the change, like so many of you said. So absolutely. Now, after we do the pre-session, usually it's done before. A lot of time it's done in walk-in clinics because they give out the forms, but even private practices sometimes choose to do it. Some choose to do it over the phone, just a 15-minute call where they can ask them some questions just to get them thinking about things before the session actually starts. Now, once the client is in, we're going to open the session, and there are two very important things we have to do. We develop the therapeutic alliance, and we ask the questions to set a clear goal for the session, not necessarily for their entire life, but for the session. And for develop the therapeutic alliance, I love the theory of Buber about dialogue. And it's the I-it versus I-thou theory. Anybody familiar with that theory? Because, all right. Okay. So before I give it away then, what do you think is the difference between an I-it relationship and an I-thou relationship? How would they be different? Any guesses? No guesses. All right.
Like your drawing. I mean, one is connecting the brains, the other one is connecting the hearts as well.
Yes, that's true. It's still relational versus objectifying. Yes, yeah, it's true. That's true. So the I-it is like you said, it's objectifying. It's centered about the brain. We're not really connecting at a human to human level. So we're objectifying, we're judging. The other person, it feels like they're being used. I can understand them and analyze them and maybe have to fix them because there's something wrong. I know what's right and they don't seem to fit with that, so I'll need to fix that. And that's the I-it. It's like dealing with an agenda. Whereas the I-thou, it's humanizing and accepting. So we understand that another human is beyond our full comprehension. We will not ever fully understand another human being. And we see them as full, as amazing and surprising in their uniqueness and things we don't know, in their presence and in their emotions. And we try to be there for them as just another human being. Again, not fully comprehensible. And we're just two human beings meeting. That's the I-thou relationship. In therapy, how these two can play out is if we're approaching therapy with an I-it relationship. And it's not that in life we never use the I-it, we sometimes use, right? So in office settings for some things, we are required to use the I-it. We're not going to walk around with that emotion all the time. But in therapy, if we're using it, then we're treating clients as cases. For us, that's just a case. That's my client with severe anxiety. That's how I remember them. We are relying too much on preset techniques. There are techniques and I go through them and the client is expected to respond to that because why not? Research says this is the right way to do it. We're interacting from the outside like an outsider and we have a knowing stance. I know better. I know what works. I know where you're going wrong. It's a knowing stance. And that's very different than what as solution-focused therapists we want to do. So our relationship with our clients is based on presence, really being there as another human being with them, on empathy, feeling for them, because that in itself is therapeutic, regardless of the questions we're going to ask after or whatever strategy we're using. There's the genuine dialogue there. There's transparency. We're not manipulating them into anything. We really want to connect with them. There's mutual respect and openness. We respect that they have the strength to do this. We respect, in this case, for single session, we respect their time when we see them when they need it, not when we're available. There's a lot of respect and openness in this relationship. And one of the most important things, our non-knowing stance. We are not the experts. We're just curious. We want to know about their life, about what works for them, about how they've managed before. So that curiosity and co-discovery is part of the I-thou relationship. And that's what makes it perfect for the solution-focused approach. Do you agree with me? Do you think the I-thou really represents what we want from a therapist using the solution-focused approach? Maybe you can write it in the chat box. Because that's the first thing that came to mind when I was introduced to this philosophy. I thought, this is perfect for solution focus. That's what we want. And the second thing, once we've built that alliance, and you see, it doesn't take much time because it's really who you are going into it. It's going to show in those first few minutes if you're going in with that relationship versus the I-it. It won't take long. And it's how you're going to be present throughout. Regardless if the session is going to last for 30 minutes or an hour, that's the way you will be present in that time that you're with the client together. And the second point is setting a goal. Setting a goal for the session. And that's very important, especially in single session therapy. We can never deal with more than one issue at a time in a single session. So if a client does come with several issues, we're going to need to ask them to choose one, right? And we make that goal for the session clear that this is the only issue we're going to be dealing with because that's how much we can take on in a single session to get results, right? And we ask open-ended questions to get that. What are your best hopes? What's the best that can come out of today's conversation? What is the purpose of our conversation today? And if it's an issue they are presenting, it's important to ask, how is this issue, how is this an issue or concern with you? How does it affect your life? Because sometimes a problem might not be affecting their life, but we want to know the way it affects their life. That's an important point in the solution-focused approach. And although we don't want to spend too much time in the part talking about the problem itself, it's important to ground before we move on. So we don't want to move on too quickly or make them feel bad for even proposing an issue, making it seem like they're complaining. We ground, and once we're ready to move on, we can see, well, what would you like instead? Where are we going to go with this? What's your preferred future and all of that? But it's okay first to validate that suffering or discomfort that they're feeling because of their problem. And that's the opening of the session. So we set the therapeutic alliance and we set the goal for the session, and then we're off to a good start. We're going to move on to the core. Now, the core, I like to imagine it like a journey, just like that a scenario we talked about the car being stuck. That's always how I view a single session. So the first thing we'd want to do in the core is orient and direct. We want to know where the client wants to go. That's their preferred future. But where are we now? Just so we know where, it's just like with a GPS, you tell them the direction, but they also ask you, so where are you now? And then they can give you the road. And that's the first part we want to do. We want to know where the client wants to go, their preferred future. That's so important. But we also want to know where we are today so we can get to where they want to go. And I call that the GPS phase. Then we have to activate the change, right? We have to start them off with something that can create enough change for them to want to continue after that. Because remember, we're not going to be there. So that ignition stage, what are the things that are going to get them up and going? And then if we have time and if you choose to, and depending on your client, you can do some practice and integration, like a test drive. Let's see how this works. Let's see if there are challenges that you might meet and try to find solutions and things for them before you set out into the real world. If that is required, depending on the case, and if you think it's valid, that can help sometimes. So these are just ideas. You never want to go through all of them. Like we said, this is not a preset kind of thing, but they're just ideas to use in the session. So with the GPS stage in the core, we want to encourage the client to talk about their preferred future. Now that we know the goal of the session, we want to know where they want to be and how that looks for them. We want to elicit as much minute details as possible. You can use the miracle question. You can just ask several questions. How is this going to look like for you? What will you be doing if you were living this life? And all the things who will notice, all the things that will make them see that preferred future. Then we will evaluate the current progress using the scaling question. And this helps us know where we are. So if that preferred future is a 10 and the total opposite is a 0, where are we now? It's a 5. Why is it not a 4? What makes us know it's a 5? And what will tell us that we're moving forward? And what will tell us we're at a 6? So we use that scaling question just to get to understand where we're standing today and know where we're going with that. And then we want to move on to what's really important, solution focus. We all do what works, what worked before. How did you deal with similar situations before? That will give us insight about what works, what worked for them, and we can use that again. So helpful and unhelpful features from previous attempts. And then also eliciting exceptions. What worked for you before? They might say, I've always had this problem. But if the problem exists, then there were probably times when the problem was absent or the problem was less severe. So we try to elicit that as well. I'm going to skip the questions. I'm surprised the time went. And then we're going to move on to strength. Sometimes it's difficult to go straight into the strength question. Ask them, what strengths do you have? You'll get a lot of, I don't know. And so we sort of have to smooth in to get them. The best way can be from the client's words. If whatever the story they're sharing, we pick up on their strength during that story, the resilience we saw, the adaptability, whatever it is strength we see, we pick up on that and we point it out. That feels natural and validating. Following up on the scaling question sometimes helps. So if they moved from a 4 to a 5, how did they do that? And that can show some strength that we can highlight. Future focused questions, as they imagine their preferred future, they naturally will draw on inner strength. And we can highlight that as well. Complimenting, genuine, specific compliments that are related to what they're sharing. Insu is famous for saying, how did you do that? It's a question, but it's a compliment. It shows that I was impressed. And exploring childhood passions. So I had a case for that. Well, I had to skip, but sometimes when we're talking with the client and we'll ask them to see their strength, a lot of the strength shows up in childhood. We can get it from there because they'll naturally use what they're good at. External resources, we'll use questions to highlight connection with other people, invite them to re-enter their social circles. That gives resilience and strength in itself. So who would be pleased once you're doing better? Who would notice? Who helped you last time things were tough? And is there a place that brings out a better version of you? And in your preferred future, who is there? And how are you relating to them differently in that place? We can use role models. Sometimes I had a client, an engineer who struggled to say no to projects, even though he knew they were not practical. He didn't know what he could do. I didn't know. And I thought, what do other engineers do? And he said, oh, well, you know, one of them never gives an answer on spot. And even though he noticed that before, it just clicked that he's going to try to do that. And that worked for him. So sometimes asking about role models, eliciting ideas. Okay, this was a person struggling with loneliness. What can you do? And they themselves, as we brainstorm, they need volunteers at the diabetes center that I go to, or I can go to the cafe and sit with friends. And if we have time, we might test drive, practice if possible. Okay, if you're going to see your friends at the cafe, let's, have a role play of what could possibly happen, and then develop an action plan. Be as specific as possible. Okay, if you're volunteering at this diabetes center, what days are you going to go and what time is going to be there? And in closing, we want to allow the client to summarize, focus on the client's takeaway, and see how they can generalize it to the other areas, and then discuss whether we want to do a follow-up. A follow-up, like the preparation, is optional. It can just tell you how effective things were. And the seating principles for single session therapies are there to help have that smooth and effective interaction. Because it's such a short time, we want to make it more effective. So the setup should immediately signal safety and collaboration, not having a therapy throne, having equal setting, using chairs that are normal, shows that cooperation. There's no hierarchy or analysis. Clear visual space, avoiding barriers, not having desks or tables. It helps the openness and the flow of the conversation. And sitting at a 45-degree angle is also less intimidating, especially for vulnerable clients. Proximity, research says 1.5 to 2 meters away usually works best, gives the person their personal space and enough to show connection as well. So the single session, a client practicing solution focus will take a non-knowing stance. They create a focus and stick to it. They maintain a good pace for the session. They maximize on the client's resources, and they believe the client can make change. And they show that through presuppositional language and leave them with a sense of hope. All right, so I'm sorry it took up until 1 o'clock. I don't know if we're allowed to take questions. Anybody have any questions? Thank you so much. Thank you, Kay. If there are questions, we can take in a few minutes. Other than that, I'll let you go. I hope it was beneficial. Thank you so much. I hope
it was very beneficial. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Really, I don't have time to say, but really, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. You were all so great. Thank you, Claire. Thank you all. So I let you go. I know you have a busy schedule, lots of other meetings to catch up with.